What's going on, kids? I'm Dave, and this is yet again another art lesson. So welcome back to Art Lessons. I'm your host, Dave Connery, and what you happened upon, if this is your first time here, is an experiment in sharing. The purpose of this show is to express real-time ideas about building a creative business and life in the only way that I can. And so today we are going to talk about my new art process. I promised this last week, and I am going to talk about it. We're going to talk about how I go from creating content and turn that into other content and turn that into art and turn that into other things in a fluid way that makes sense for me and is going to help me build the gigantic empire that I am going to build. I do that with an evil laugh. You can't see this on the video, but I'm doing a weird hand gesture that's like evil. That's probably not that evil. The way this came about was a conversation from a guy by the name of Roberto Blake. He is a YouTuber, and I had actually heard him on Anchor, the audio app. He had asked his people, what gets in the way or what keeps you from doing your thing? If you know me, not much gets in my way. If I want to do something, I'm just going to go out there and do it. But time is a thing. Not having enough time to do all the things. And when I say all the things, I mean all the things. And there's so many different things to be doing that sometimes it gets a little bit unfocused. Not necessarily unfocused in general, but I can't focus on every single thing because I have so many different things to do. And so I feel like at times my growth in the many different areas that I need to be in, whether it's my art, whether it's my vlog, whether it's social media, whether it's blogging, whether it's whatever, I don't get to spend enough time in any single one of those. And so it really kind of detracts from my potential of growth. How do I grow anywhere if I'm having to spend so much time everywhere? So Roberto answered my question on Anchor, and he came up with a really great idea. I mean, it's probably an idea that he's had for a while, and who knows, it may not be necessarily his original idea, but he gave me some great insight. And it's really very simple. You start with the core, the cornerstone, the thing that you thrive in the most, like whatever outlet it is that you feel like you need to be in the most. If you're a blogger, then it should be your blog. If you're a writer, then it should be your books. If you are a podcaster or an audio person, then you should be in the podcast and wherever audio goes. If you are a vlogger like me, then you should video blog and then figure out how that works. Or if it's Instagram or Snapchat or wherever it is that you feel you are strongest, make that your cornerstone. And then everything else becomes a derivative. Everything else trickles down from that space. So I had to put it to some thought. Didn't take very long, but I put it to some thought about what is my cornerstone. Where is the place that I spend the most time, where I feel I do the most good, where I am doing the best work, and how can I make that work for everything else that I'm doing? If you think about all the things that I wanted to do at the time when I first started thinking about this, I wanted to do the vlog. I wanted to write, I wanted to put out books, I wanted to podcast again, and of course I wanted to be making art and art-related things. That's a lot of stuff. So how do you go from YouTube to all of that? Well, I'm going to explain it to you. So what I have here in my hand is called the hierarchy of awesome, and I use awesome because that's the word that Roberto uses a lot. Awesome is kind of his catchword, if you will. So the hierarchy of awesome, and it's a flow chart, a block flow chart of how I do things. And, if your video, you can see it. If your audio, it's tough. Too bad. Go watch the video. Anyway, that right there, just an example right there. What I just did right there is a part of this whole plan. I'm trying to drive you back to YouTube by telling you to go watch the video so that you can see the video. You can subscribe to my YouTube channel, and you can like the image or the video and all that. That's all part of the plan. Everything I say that directs back to YouTube is all part of the plan because YouTube is the cornerstone. YouTube is where I spend my greatest amount of time. I watch more videos there than I do anywhere else. I watch more content rather than anywhere else. I spend a lot of time putting up stuff there. And so it is the cornerstone. It's where I find the most joy. And so it becomes the main piece. And then everything else comes from that. Even the art, if you can believe that. So if you look at YouTube as the top spot, then if you trickle down, there's 3 spots that come underneath that. One is the podcast, one is the vlog, and then the third one is like snippets, tiny little videos that I put out that help kind of create short, quick bite content for people to absorb. So let's start with the first, podcast. Obviously, right here, what I'm doing right now. I'm recording this on video, I'm recording this on audio, and this becomes the podcast for everybody to listen to. It goes to SoundCloud. Then it goes to iTunes and Stitcher and Google Play and all these other places so that a whole variety of people in all types of markets can get access. Now, of course, SoundCloud is a social media outlet with music and audio and whatnot. I'm not a real strong user of SoundCloud. I do like it. I do appreciate it. It houses my podcast, and so it's important, but it's not the mainstay, right? I'm more concerned about just having a good, solid place for it to exist, the podcast to exist, and trickle out from there. If people go and share and like it, they're more likely to be able to share and like it from SoundCloud. They can embed from SoundCloud, and so it's like a natural place for me to put this stuff so that other people can share it and listen to it and whatnot. And then, of course, iTunes and all the other ones get naturally, like delivered to after the fact. So aside from just having the podcast, there's also things I can pull from that. I can pull sound bites and I can create content around those sound bites. Maybe you don't have 20 minutes to invest in a podcast, but you have 2 or you have 1. And that gets delivered to Facebook, that gets delivered to Instagram, maybe even Snapchat, in little snippets, tidbits, bites, easily consumable stuff. And most of the time, when I do those little snippets, I tease back to the podcast. You heard that. You want to hear more, you got to go back to the podcast. And I'll lead them back to the podcast. Go find me on iTunes or wherever you find your podcast and do that thing, subscribe and rate and like and do all the stuff. I pull people in with tiny bits of content, and then I feed them back. Now, I'm not doing a ton of this yet, but that's the plan. That's the idea. I got the tiny little snippets of content, and that feeds them back to the main place, which could be iTunes, but if they really want to go deep, they can go all the way back up to YouTube to find this video. Now, another idea about the audio that I will toy with in the future, but I don't really have much, I don't have a base of understanding of this yet, but I think it's something that could possibly happen is I could take individual pieces of those snippets or more of that content and kind of package it up into something special that maybe people can purchase or they can get if they were part of a special program. I'm not going to put this too far out there just yet, but I am toying with the idea of starting a Patreon account, but maybe it's the Patreon people that get that content first or entirely. No promises yet about if that's really going to come out, or if that's really going to become something, but that's an idea, something I've been thinking about. So now let's jump over to the vlog side of things. Obviously, the vlog helps people get a better understanding of the things that I do. The podcast talks about what I think, how I feel, the things I've learned about being an artist, a working artist. The vlog, which is more art-related, art-centric, like last week, I built this gigantic canvas. If you're watching video, you can see it behind me. It's totally blank. But I built that canvas, and I made a vlog out of it. And so that content kind of becomes a base of more information. Like maybe there's going to be snippets that I can pull from that. I'll get to the snippets in a bit, but I can pull from that. Other times I have created actual art, like time-lapse pictures or video of my art being made. And that content obviously becomes the stuff that I sell. The art that I make while I'm making that vlog video becomes art that I can sell on my website, or I can make prints and whatever products, swag products that I make on Society 6. The art helps me create a vlog video, and the vlog helps me gain attention, and the art helps me, eat because you go and buy that stuff. Now, of course, from the vlog comes the snippets, and the snippets can be fed back to YouTube as small little tidbits if people just want to consume something quick, or to Facebook, which is a good place because people on Facebook have a really short attention span as well. Edit down even more, can be fed back into Instagram, A lot of times what I'll do is I will Insta story the snippets, or I'll Insta story the vlog itself, or even the podcast, and that becomes content as well. And whenever I make any of this, whether it's the podcast, the vlog, the snippets, or whatever, all of that stuff gets put back into my website, into the blog, the regular blog, as well as some of it gets fed into my newsletter, which I put out once a month. So I start with YouTube. That becomes a podcast and or vlog. Some of that becomes snippet information that I get fed out to all these other places. And the stuff that I do within that potentially has the ability to become something I can sell. That was a roundabout way of me saying the stuff that I do can be sold and you can buy and I can eat. So if I make art or if I make audio content that I could essentially package up and use some way to, to gain some sort of income that way, I, again, haven't really thought it through 100%, but it's a concept, it's an idea. Some of the stuff that I make may be books, or I can make and turn into books that can be sold on Amazon or can be sold directly through my website. There's also other things that I can pull. I can pull quotes as audio, but actually make them into like typographical things that I can put and use that towards Instagram, or I can create concepts around ideas that I've talked about, like concepts that I actually feature on designs that I'd put out on Society 6, or maybe it's just something I decide to make on Instagram. Like just the other day, I posted up a piece that I call Fake Life, and it's a picture of a dude walking down the runway, but I clipped him out, and then I had some kind of abstract shapes behind him, like something, basically a digital version of the actual art that I normally do. It was something that came out of something I said when I was doing one of these episodes. Can't remember if it was the vlog or the podcast, but it was something I said when I did that, and that became a germinating idea, and I turned that into something cool. Now, will I turn that into a piece of art that I can sell? Maybe. I don't know. Haven't decided yet, but it was something that happened, and it was something new, and it was a new way of me reaching out to other people, but it was also a new way for me to explore a different identity, something that I hadn't touched on, at least from a digital standpoint. So that's basically it. That's my art process right now. Before, it used to be like I would make art, and then sometimes I would make a video of that, and sometimes I might record something on Instagram or Insta Stories, or sometimes I would turn that into a book and make a book, obviously sell a book about my art stuff, or maybe it's just concepts and I feed that into a blog and a newsletter. Everything I was doing before is the same stuff I'm doing now, except now I'm just a lot more organized about it all. I know the hierarchy of all this stuff. I know that I have to start with YouTube, and from YouTube, everything else trickles down and becomes something else and becomes a bigger thing. And some of this stuff will fall away as it becomes less easy to do or less important, or it's not as effective as other things, but most of it is core. Most of it is definitely stuff I'm going to continue to do for a long time. Now, will I do all of it all the time, every month, every week, every day? Probably not, but a lot of it is going to stay as part of a fundamental process of what I'm doing. As I said, I've got this gigantic canvas behind me right here, and if I'm making a vlog about this big canvas, I'm obviously not going to be able to finish that in the period of one vlog video. This is going to take me a long time to create this piece, and so I can't expect that I'm always going to be able to generate art every single week with every single vlog. I can't expect that I'm always going to say something that's going to generate enough idea to become a snippet. I can't say that everything I'm going to do is going to turn into some sort of book idea or design idea. I'm not always going to have all that, but I'm flexible. As long as I start at the top with the YouTube and trickle its way down to everything else, and then at least at some point has something that people can buy, then I've made it. Then I've done a good job. Of course, I have to still continue to interact and share and put stuff up on social media and whatnot. I still have to do all that stuff, but the main idea is start at the top of the YouTube, make the content, let it trickle down, make something that actually people can buy, and then get to eat. Putting food on the table, putting a roof over the head. Is it a perfect plan? I don't know, but it works for me. You have to go figure out your own perfect plan. Now, it may not necessarily start with YouTube. It may not necessarily start with a podcast. It may not necessarily start with any of those things that I just talked about, but it's a good idea to figure out what is the core and how do you trickle down from there. So now let's jump over to Ask Dave a Question. I need to find a better title for this segment. Ask Dave a Question. Take a lesson from Dave. I don't know. I got a Q, and so I'm going to make it an A. Question, let's make it an answer. This one is from Melissa Jenkins, and she says, I do a lot of digital painting, abstract painting, actually. I have always wanted to create speed videos where I record myself painting, then speed it up, but most people do that and then add music. Done that. I've always wanted to do more, talk about something maybe, but I have no idea what to talk about at all. This is what bothers me. I have a pretty insular life, so I feel like I have nothing to talk about at all, so I don't record myself doing art. Should I just record and add music? Or if I talk, what on earth should I talk about? Good question. I think yes is the answer. I do believe that you can do both of those things. You can do just music and be okay with that, or you can talk about whatever random thing you want to talk about that is inspiring you. Maybe it's what inspired you to make that art, or what is something important that you want to share about your current life, or maybe current events. There's obviously a lot of tumultuous stuff going on in the world today. Maybe you want to talk about that. Maybe you want to talk about something you experienced when you went out to some art-related thing you did. It doesn't have to be anything too specific, and it doesn't have to fit into a tidy little box. What's important is that you get it out there, you do it, and the more often that you do it, the more comfortable you're going to be about doing it, and pretty soon you're going to be standing here in front of a mic like I am, watching, filming a video, sitting on a mic behind in front of a giant canvas, and just talking about whatever is the first thing that comes to mind. And you're going to get really good at that. But it takes practice, and you just got to put yourself out there and do that thing. The other side of this is that many times what you and I may think is nothing, quote unquote nothing, and not very important, is something that other people find intriguing and interesting. They may not know much about you, but you start sharing stuff about your life, about who you are, about what you believe, then that adds a layer of context that most people will never get about your art, except the people that watch the videos. Now, there's plenty of people that put up videos, especially on YouTube, where they do speed painting and then they either have the music or they talk during or they talk after. There is a woman by the name of Mary Doodles. She's pretty good about that. Like, she'll do her watercolor thing, and it's pretty interesting to see how she layers her watercolor. And so it's cool to just watch and not really worry about having to listen to her talk. But then she cuts in after the fact and talks about the art and what she's doing and how you can get it and blah, blah, blah. Then there's other guys that I think it's Ross Straws, I think is the guy's name, is this Asian kid who does these more, like fantasy art type stuff. And he's very funny. He's witty. He has a lot of humor, and he cuts in with different things about how this whole process is working out. And it's interesting. And so there's lots of different ways to do it. Many, 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 many different ways. It really doesn't matter how you do it. You have to just find your flow. And the only way to find your flow is to get in there and do it. You have to get to work. You have to start putting stuff out. And the first few that you put out are going to suck. Plain and simple. They're not going to be great. But you put them up anyway, and you keep moving on. Because the next one's going to be better, and the one after that's going to be better than that, and the one after that's better, and the one after that is better. I'm still putting out these podcasts, and I know that the first few are not great. You got to just put it out there and get to it and make stuff happen, and don't worry about how good it sounds or how good it looks. Just do it, because it'll get better. And eventually people will find you, and they'll appreciate you, and you'll get encouraged by some of the kind words that people share, and it'll all feel great. But you got to do something. Like now, today. In fact, I encourage you right now, Melissa, to go film a video, to do the speed time lapse, either talk over it or don't talk over it, and post it up. That's my challenge to you. And that's my challenge to every single one of you. Whether it's a video podcast or video blog or podcast, Insta story, whatever, I don't care. Go do something, put it up today, whether you like it or not, because that's going to lead you into something greater down the road. All right, on that note, I am going to cut out. So, kids, you have a great rest of your week. I hope it's awesome. Remember, be good today, be even better tomorrow. See ya.